Hi, Don. Could we do a quick mic check?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sylvia, would you like to do a quick mic check?
I would. Hi, Colin. How are you?
Doing good. I can hear you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Sarah. Would you like to do a quick mic check?
Yes, hi, this is Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Colin, I assume we're not broadcasting at this moment, correct? No one can hear
Actually,
us.
we just started the YouTube broadcast, so we're now on YouTube.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
Thank you.
I won't share my tasteless and not funny jokes then.
Well, it's your choice.
Morning, Sylvia. Morning, Colin.
Good morning. I can hear you. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Supervisor.
Good morning.
2021 will be a better year. I feel very hopeful. We've got a lot of exciting things coming forward.
I guarantee it.
I do too.
Yep.
I'm really encouraged by the vaccine news. I'm so excited
Yes.
about the facilities we're bringing online.
Yeah.
And a possible new board president. I mean, we love them all, but
Thank you. Thank you. But that vaccine news, there's been a new one for a third week in a row now.
mm-hmm.
So, and I also got wind, I don't know what company it is, of some companies producing a pill.
Wow.
And that would be much better accepted.
I think so, especially with my son who is shot sort of averse. Yeah.
If I saw them taking blood from you or giving a shot, I faint.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think that's
I understand the phobia, the anxiety, the whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
No, all good. Colin, we're just missing Supervisor Smitty, it looks like.
That's correct.
Okay. Good. How's everybody else doing? Hi, Harry. Good morning.
He's on mute.
Oh, good morning.
There you go.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
And technically we have by my clock about a minute, so
Yeah.
technically no one's late yet.
No.
Except for us early risers who like to get to meetings early.
On time. No rain predicted for the next 10 days.
Did you hear about Klay Thompson? I guess he's got some injury. That's just...
Yes, I saw the Warriors picked up the center yesterday. So I didn't see it, but did they, in basketball, the last 5 picks, are those like ping pong balls, or did the Warriors actually come in with the second worst record? How did they not the number 1?
So I know that they're, I know that their bad record, though, I thought helped contribute, but I do believe there is
more balls, right?
Yeah, the worst team gets 10 balls, the next one gets 9, the next one gets 8, 7. Like Harry's saying, it's a graduated. And I think they do it, Harry, with the top or the bottom 5 teams.
I actually don't remember the number, but I know that you get the worse you are, the more balls you get. But if you're the worst, it keeps you from tanking. So if you totally tanked, you don't get the number 1 pick, guaranteed, right?
Yes. No, it's and sometimes the 5th worst gets it. It's 10 o'clock. Supervisor Simidian is here, and we are good to go. All right, everybody, welcome to the November 19th and final. No, we have December 17th. Maybe we'll see what we need there. Anyway, November 19th Hewlett meeting, and with that, a call to order, please.
Good morning, Vice Chairperson Simidian.
He's unmuting.
Present. Thank you. Chairperson Wasserman.
Present as well.
Thank you, sir. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment that's got a hand raised?
We have no public speakers, sir.
Okay, does anyone here today have anyone where they are wishing to speak? Seeing none, Supervisor Simidian will move on to item 3, which is approval of the consent calendar, which is currently items 8 through 12. I would suggest we add number 7 onto that if you don't have objection.
I have no objection, and I'm happy to move approval of the consent calendar as contained in our published agenda with the addition of item number 7, Mr. Chairman.
Bam, that's the motion. I second it. Passes unanimously. I don't think we need a roll call with 2 people. You agree?
I leave it to the clerk and the county council, Mr. Chairman. I'm good.
Good. Are we fine, Dave?
If council has no objection, we can move on, sir.
Thank you very much. Item number 4, let me switch here. Received report from the Office of Supportive Housing relating to the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, with the City of Los Altos regarding housing opportunities. All right, let's start with item number, sorry, I didn't switch my page here.
And we have Consuelo Hernandez here.
Consuelo, there's Consuelo. There's half a Consuelo. Hi, Consuelo, good morning. Would you please give a brief report of anything you think we should know? She's not muted, but we don't hear you. She's moving up the Hollywood Squares.
Key, do you have some background that perhaps you could kick this off while we have Consuelo figure out her muting issue by chance?
Well, I'll give the background and then we'll wait for Consuelo to add any substantive comments.
Well, thank you, Deputy County Executive Lee.
Good morning, everyone. The county has been working with the City of Los Altos and the Open Space District to acquire and potentially redevelop the property at 330 Distal Circle. I think this, as part of this effort, the City of Los Altos identified the ways in which it would contribute or facilitate the development. And sort of this MOU with the city lays out some of those details. And I think some of it includes the waiving of park fees and sort of the entitlement process. So that's sort of the background there. I don't know if Consuelo, I think she's shaking her head. So we'll just have.
Let's turn first. Do we have any public speakers on this item?
I see no public speakers, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll turn to Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you will recall, this item is before the committee today at my request. Thank you for accommodating that request. And I had made the request because the subject property is in my district. I happen to know the site well by virtue of the fact that it is currently the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District office. I have just a couple of questions for staff. I have been in touch with staff offline, but I wanted to clarify a couple of things and also just make sure we had some things on the public record. And thank you both to Ms. Hernandez and Mr. Lee for their help here. So we have a memorandum of understanding which staff is, I believe, prepared to execute. Do I have that right?
That's correct, Supervisor Simidian.
Oh, here we go, Consuelo.
And I just want to confirm what I think is fairly clear from the enclosure. This memorandum of understanding has been reviewed in an open and public setting by the City Council of Los Altos, and they have signed off on it 5-0. Is that correct or not?
That is correct, Supervisor Simidian. The City Council held a meeting in October, and there was some discussion around the AMI levels for the proposed development. So there was a change from what staff submitted as a recommendation, and those changes are captured in the MOU that's attached to the report as attachment A.
Thank you. And I understand that notwithstanding the fact that there was some changes on that, there was still a little bit of confusion in the minutes at the City of Los Altos about whether the maximum was 80% of area median income or 120%. Could you tell us both what the actual correct answer to that question is, and also whether both parties are absolutely clear about that as we go forward, please?
Yes, great question, Supervisor. We have clarified with the City of Los Altos city attorney and with their staff during our weekly check-in. Today, they confirmed that they will be taking a revision to the minutes at their next city council meeting that accurately captures the discussion and recommendation from the council, which is that the units will be at 80% and not 120% of the area median income. So they will have to take a formal action to revise the minutes.
Thank you. And if I can ask both you and Mr. Lee, you're feeling confident, I gather, that everybody is clear that it's 80%, notwithstanding the error or correction necessary in the minutes, yes?
That is correct, Supervisor Simitian. The version of the MOU that's attached to this report was provided by the City of Los Altos.
Great, thank you. And I've got it in my hand, all marked up, thank you. One of the other questions I had was, I noticed that packet page 13 and 14, the memorandum of understanding indicates that the city acknowledges that the county will need binding entitlements for the project prior to April 27th, 2021. Is that still your expectation?
It really will depend on the city's assessment of two things, Supervisor. One is whether a conditional use permit is required or whether there's a streamlining act bill that they can use for the entitlements. So we do not have a response right now, but just based on my professional experience, I don't believe that April 2021 is realistic, in the sense that it won't allow for a robust enough community engagement session. This morning, we did yellow tag a working draft of the community engagement strategy, and the timing of that is now looking like a submission package would be submitted by April, but the full entitlements would not be in place by then.
Excuse me, Supervisor Consuelo, what's yellow tag?
I'm sorry, it's just a word that we use internally on staff to say it was attachment B was provided to you this morning and not as part of your original packet, which means you haven't had an opportunity to see it.
Thank you.
We are working in partnership with the City of Los Altos, and they've blessed the working draft this morning.
Thank you, Supervisor. Sorry for interrupting.
No, thank you for the clarification. And do we have, and notwithstanding that fact, if assuming that it takes longer, and I had thought April 27th, 2021 was unlikely to be possible, let me put it to you that way. Notwithstanding the fact, since the acquisition of the property was contingent on due diligence, even though you probably won't have binding entitlements by that date, is it your plan to move forward with the acquisition?
Yes, there are benchmarks in our purchase and sale agreement that we have to meet, and obligations that we have to meet in order to mitigate the county's risks as we acquire the property. And so by that April date, even though we won't have entitlements in place, we'll be in a good position to determine whether moving forward is appropriate or not. Based on our discussions with the city and some advocates in the community, things are looking pretty good at this point. We are not seeing any conversations in the neighborhoods or with the community that they would be opposed to having affordable housing on the site.
Thank you. And let me just ask, do you have any understanding or clarity yet about whether or not an environmental impact report will be required?
The city is looking at that right now, Supervisor Simitian. They need more information regarding the actual project in order to firm up that determination.
Okay. Thank you. I think that answers all of my questions. I appreciate the fact that the staff has heard from our board and our office the clear request for community outreach, and I know I don't have to exhort you, but I will anyway, Ms. Hernandez and Mr. Lee, to please keep up the robust community outreach. I think the project has great promise. I'm really delighted to see it, and as you know, this is a community that has struggled to provide housing, including affordable housing, and so I would hate to see us lose the opportunity simply because we had not had the kind of outreach that will be necessary to make the project go. So thank you again for that. And Mr. Chairman, I noticed that the only request today is that we receive the report. So I am happy to move that we receive the report, and if such a motion is helpful.
Thank you. I don't think we even need a motion for that. We'll consider it received.
Without objection. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5 is to receive report from the Los Altos Hills County Fire District relating to implementations of board-approved management audit division recommendations. Do we have Cheryl on?
Yes, I'm
there,
here.
Cheryl. There you go.
Hi.
Take it away.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Pursuant to direction of the Board of Supervisors, we were asked to prepare a monthly report to this committee as well as to FGOC. And this is the first of those monthly reports that will continue through October of 2021. And in a nutshell, what we've seen so far is that the Los Altos Hills County Fire District is implementing the board-approved recommendations from the audit of the Los Altos Hills County Fire District that we performed. And at this time, we don't have concerns about the progress that they've made.
Wonderful. Do we have, before I turn to you, Supervisor Simidian, do we have any public speakers on this item? David?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank everybody involved for working so hard and so well to sort of move this along in a positive direction. And among all the pieces of paper we have on this one, I would turn to packet page 18, the very last sentence in the 2-page report we have from Ms. Solov, our management audit leader. And that single sentence is, in conclusion, we believe that the fire district has implemented or is on track to implement the audit recommendations as adopted by the Board of Supervisors. And that really sort of cuts to the chase on this whole conversation. I see that we have representatives of the district present, but before we go to them, if that's your pleasure, I should just point out, I think it is worth noting, as the materials do, that County Council is on board, as we had discussed at the full board level, signing off on all actions in terms of documents as to form and legality. I think that is significant. I also think that as we look at the 2-page report from Ms. Solov, again, the tree removal program issues have been addressed, as is indicated on packet page 17. We've got clarity now about both Brown Act issues and legal records being properly stored. And the fire prevention programs are now clearly aligned with fire risks, which was an issue that was previously discussed. And the issues of fire district compliance with state and local procurement requirements are also documented. So I know you know all this, Supervisor Wasserman, and I know that you have the same piece of paper that you've read, but just for the public record, I thought it was useful to get it into the record. The one request I would make, Mr. Chairman, since these reports are going to be monthly, is I do think it would be helpful if we could, if you're amenable, Mr. Chairman, ask the fire district to include in its next report information on regional cooperation and/or mutual aid issues. And I know this was a sort of a concern in the larger discussion we had at the full board because that meeting was, as you will recall, quite lengthy. We didn't really get a chance to discuss efforts that have already been underway. I'm thinking of the battalion chief that is paid for by the district, the increased mode staffing as it is referred to, additional equipment that is sometimes acquired on a rental basis by the district and available for other parts of the county. Not to mention conversations that are already underway or that have been discussed recently about the potential for a cooperative agreement of what's known as Station 8, as well as the potential use of the Purísima Arrastradero site as a staging area. I think that this is consistent with the recommendation 4.1 in the audit report. I don't want to impose upon you or the committee staff, Mr. Chairman, the obligation to have a more wide-ranging discussion each month about the district issues than we could or should, but the action of our board was specifically to ask for follow-up on each of the audit items, and audit item 4.1 has to do with wildfire prevention issues and spending priorities and risks and recommendations. So I think we're wholly within the boundaries of 4.1 to request that information. And I also think, frankly, it's a good opportunity for the district to share some of the good work it's been doing. So if you're amenable to that request, Mr. Chairman, I would just ask that come back at our next meeting.
Thank you. I'll take yes for an answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think that wraps it up.
Commissioner Tyson, since you're here, you wish to add anything?
No, I just want to state thank you for the opportunity that we're fully in compliance, in thought, word, and deed, and we are very open to and willingly and eagerly cooperating in a regional manner, such as Supervisor Simidian has suggested.
Super, thank you. And Dave, for the record, Supervisor Simidian added in a request. We'll take that as his motion. I'll second that. And all in favor, say aye. Aye. That passes unanimously, Dave.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We now move on to item number 6. I was just going to ask Supervisor Simidian if he thought that the fire district meeting was long, what would he call last Tuesday's meeting? That'll be another topic. Item number 6 is to receive a report from the Roads and Airports Department relating to the 2016 Measure B 10-year expenditure outlook. Harry, this is going to be starting off with you, expenditure outlook from VTA. So that's all roads and airports. Mr. Freitas.
Yeah, thank you very much. Jeff, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I always wanted to do that just to make sure. So just before I get started on this item, thank you for the opportunity to present this to the Hewlett Committee. We received a request to present this item a relatively short time ago. So we've pulled together some slides to aid in the discussion, but certainly this is a complex and nuanced subject. And so what we're presenting today is a somewhat, let's just say a somewhat of a simplified view that reflects really the impacts of what's being discussed mostly on the county roads and airports delivery of services, as opposed to some of the really large scale issues that we have here in terms of voter promises and geographic equity and countywide mobility. This goes very, very deep into what Santa Clara County wants to do in terms of mobility and transit investments. We're probably not prepared to have that discussion today. I'll get through now with the caveats on my presentation and move right into it.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas, I'll interrupt you for just 1 second. I want to give you a shout out. I often have issues as to how far in advance I receive PowerPoints from various departments. And I appreciate the fact that you got this out to me and Supervisor Simidian in plenty of time so that we could look over these things. Thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you very much. So a reminder on the program. So what we're talking about today is the 2016 Measure B transportation program, commonly known as self-help programs. California and Santa Clara, in California, Santa Clara County led the way as self-help counties, along with a couple of counties in Southern California. And we've had successful implementation of self-help sales tax measures for the past 25 years here in the county, and the projects have all been delivered successfully. What we're talking about here is 2016 Measure B, passed by 72% of the voters of Santa Clara County, and at the time envisioned as a $5.5 billion program. Now that program consists of these elements. This is just a reminder for all those of the folks watching at home, so they know exactly what we're talking about. I list first that the county expressway improvements, $750 million over 30 years, 20 projects, and these are mostly could be described as capacity enhancements, although all these programs, the program of projects and the expressways would also include bicycle and pedestrian improvements to the extent that they can be included, but they're generally capacity enhancements. Congestion relief is a common way of describing these. Highway interchanges, $750 million, 24 candidate projects, somewhat competitive, meaning that cities and Caltrans and counties can put forth investments in these candidate projects and will receive money in order of how fast they can deliver things like preliminary engineering, EIRs, and designs. Local Streets and Roads is a formula program, and that provides essentially road repair, paving, if you want to call it potholes and paving. All cities, towns, and counties receive it based on a formula, receive funding. State Route 85 was envisioned as an evaluation of whether or not light rail should really go down the middle or other types of transit services and enhancements on 85, and including some congestion relief projects and noise abatement. Noise has been an issue with the concrete pavement and the ridging in that road, and it leads to perception, at least, of additional noise on that roadway. Transit operations, which is essentially bus operations frequency, including light rail. This also extends to transit for seniors, disabled, and people who use the paratransit type systems. Then the largest, well, one of the largest program expenditures, BART Phase 2, which continues the BART project from its terminus right now at the Berryessa station. It would continue it through downtown San Jose, actually through Little Portugal, at Alum Rock and Five Wounds, and then continue it into downtown San Jose, and ultimately terminating roughly at the Caltrain station in Santa Clara, and construction, I believe, of a maintenance facility at that location. Then bicycle pedestrian, this is a competitive program. Money has already been allocated to this program. It's valued at $250 million. Competitive meaning cities and counties can apply for competitive grants through the VTA. Caltrain corridor enhancement, there's two Caltrain categories. One is really capacity enhancements, including level boarding, which actually increases frequency because it makes the boarding of the trains faster, which means the trains have less dwell time at the station. So level boarding is actually a capacity enhancement. And then the Caltrain grade separations in the North County, Caltrain is impeded by grade crossings and limited to 80 miles an hour, 79 miles an hour. And it also is an impediment to east-west traffic across the Caltrain tracks and leads to congestion in those cities. So that's the program. Thanks for bearing with me on that. Recent activities. So what we've been hearing from the VTA staff is they've informally communicated that to the staff of the various cities, public works directors, public works leadership, that they were forecasting a shortfall and that they were going to be moving towards a cash strategy for BART funding. And they delivered that message to a smaller group of their TAC committee, their Technical Advisory Committee, which the county sits on. The VTA staff, over, obviously strong concerns on the part of staff over the impacts of the shortfall and moving money towards and cash towards the BART project. The VTA staff formed an ad hoc group, which I sit on as the county's representative. This is a staff level group. And we've begun discussing some of the challenges that the VTA has. Exactly at the same time, the VTA staff started agendizing information items to subcommittees. And the VTA uses a subcommittee structure as a governance tool, and they've traditionally ran policy decisions and policy proposals through its subcommittee structure as a means of informing the greater VTA board of technical, political, and community considerations that need to be considered before the VTA board acts. So far, they've presented this to the PAC, the TAC, and the BPAC. That's alphabet soup. The PAC Supervisor Simidian spoke at the PAC, and that is the Supervisor Wasserman's on the PAC. So that's the Policy Advisory Committee. The TAC is the one that we sit on. It's called the Technical Advisory Committee, and the BPAC is the Bike Ped Advisory Committee. I understand that the VTA is also actually speaking to more subcommittees this morning, and we informed their staff that this item was going to be on this agenda, but they're a little tied up with their committees explaining this. So let me just briefly go into the proposal. It's right now a 10-year suspension of funding for almost all the program categories, with the exception of BART, transit operations, and the bicycle ped program. So the programs that would be essentially zeroed out for the next 10 years would be local streets and roads, expressways, Caltrain, Route 85, and highways.
Mr. Chairman, through the chair, excuse the interruption. I wonder if I could just ask Mr. Freitas to pause here for a minute. Mr. Freitas, you're doing an admirable job of running through a lot of information, but I don't want the core of this to get lost in the depth of your presentation. Just to be clear, voters in 2016 approved a sales tax in what amount again, please?
The $2016 and 72% of our voters approved it, by the way, 5.5 billion.
And that was how much per, was that a half cent, quarter cent?
A half-cent sales tax, that's correct.
Thank
30
you.
years. 30 years.
Forgive me for asking you questions I know the answer to, but I really do want to highlight them for this meeting. And the process is one in which 9 different funding categories have been identified. And what you are telling us now is that if this proposal, which I understand the VTA staff continues to suggest is not a proposal, but merely a discussion document, but that if this proposal goes forward, that notwithstanding the fact that the voters were told that the funds would be spent on local streets and roads, expressways, Caltrain, grade separation, Route 85, and highways, that there will be $0 for a decade for these items. Is that clear? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and Mr. Freitas, I want to be very clear. I don't want to shoot the messenger here today. I know you're representing the county and doing it well and sharing this information, but I just think people need to sort of stop and focus on the proposal, notwithstanding the fact that given the kerfuffle, people are now reluctant to call it a proposal, is to tell folks, notwithstanding the tax they paid and notwithstanding the congestion and notwithstanding the fact that the vast majority of the taxes paid over the last 20 years for the measure passed in 2000 and 2008 were for BART to San Jose, that, and notwithstanding the limitations in the ballot measure, that we're going to go a decade without any relief on local streets and roads, expressways, Caltrain, Route 85, and highways. I'm not asking you to have my passion or my attitude about this. I'm just asking, is that a clear and accurate statement of what is in the proposal?
That's clear and accurate, yes.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for taking you off track. I just wanted to make sure
you didn't take me off track.
Go. All right, then I'll let you get back on track, or which may be a poor choice of words in this circumstance.
As an aside, I'm presenting this in somewhat of a clinical way. I mean, I guess you should have been in the room when we were told about this, because it wasn't well received.
All right, fair enough. Thank you.
I just want you to know it wasn't well received by the county public works directors, if you will. As we said, as you just went over, the proposal would be to use cash funding, and I assume some borrowing, but that's unclear, for BART Phase 2. One of the issues that we brought up early on was that modification to the funding formulas would require a supermajority of board approval. The VTA assures us that no changes to the statutory allocations are being proposed, and it's simply an extension, a suspension of 10 years of funding. So the ad hoc committee has essentially has asked for some information, and we haven't received some of it yet, and some of it may be forthcoming. One of the things that the VTA cites frequently and has not been able to provide us locals, if you will, is the UCLA report that they cite a lot. And what they're referring to is a report, I believe, from UCLA. I think it's a school of business, where the VTA has hired those folks to provide them with the revenue projections. And we have not received that report. We've told that report is probably not available to us.
Excuse the interruption. May I ask why?
Why is it not available? He's asking why it's not available to us.
You know, I can't. I didn't ask that question completely directly, but I was told that, you know, roll-ups of that report, but apparently it's some sort of privileged information. And
let me interrupt again. Excuse me, Mr. Freitas. Do we have county counsel on the line? I believe we do, through the chair.
Yes.
Yes, Supervisor Smitty, and I'm on the line. This is Tony Lopresti.
Mr. Lopresti, I rarely, if ever, have done this, but could we get a confidential memo, if need be, within the next week, literally, because time is of the essence, on our ability to get the UCLA report on revenues? I find it very troubling that we're being told decisions are being made based on a report, which report is not available to the public, including one of the member governmental organizations. Is that something that, I mean, I assume this is a conventional CPRA issue, California Public Records Act issue. Is that something we could get a timely report on?
Yes, Supervisor Smitty, and it certainly looks that way. On the surface, we'll do some work to figure out the specifics of what the report entails and what VTA is claiming with regards to its privileged nature, and get a confidential memo out to this group.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I will just say I hope that we will be able to ask as a board for a copy of the document as one governmental agency. And if for any reason that's either not possible, or for some reason that's not the will of the majority of the board, I just want to indicate as an individual supervisor, I will make that request myself, because I believe the information should be public. So again, I apologize for interrupting, but
they're public funds.
thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Lopresti, thank you for being here and taking some time off from all your COVID-related legal affairs. Really appreciate your support in that area.
Absolutely, Supervisor.
Okay, so I'll just keep going. This one is maybe it's something we requested. You know, essentially, the ad hoc committee is asking where the BART priority rests in in board direction, and I mean VTA board. You know, we're here. You know, we're hearing that BART is the priority, but we're having, you know, and I assume that this is something that the VTA board is obviously going to have to weigh in on relative to this proposal. But for staff to bring forward this proposal at this point, usually a proposal this significant would have to at least have some basis in board direction. So we're looking for that. There's a troubling issue for us, at least for the staff, on the VTA staff position, that the board does not, at least according to the staff, that the board is not in favor of using borrowing or bonding as a means to deliver the Measure B program. And there's a number of issues associated with that. One is a VTA staff position that any borrowing or bonding for an individual element of the program must be deducted off the top of the entire program. So that is not consistent with the way our familiarity with other programs has been, in that, for instance, you know, and I'm sorry, I'm describing this in a kind of complicated way. The VTA staff position has said if they borrow for BART, that essentially local streets and roads has to take a haircut. What I'm saying is that they would deduct the borrowing costs from the entire program, and therefore all elements of the program would suffer from the borrowing costs. Our position has been, or our understanding, excuse me, our understanding has been is that borrowing would come out of the programs that need borrowing as a mechanism to deliver their program elements, meaning that those programs that can't make it on a cash flow basis would bear the cost of borrowing. That's really important when we talk about the next item, because the decision on borrowing really relates from a financial standpoint on whether or not the borrowing cost is greater than the potential escalation costs associated with pushing program elements out. And we have asked for that, we haven't received really that yet. And you know, with interest rates being as low as they are right now, and the quality bonding capacities, or the quality bond ratings, you will, of local agencies, and our record of paying back, meaning Santa Clara County's record of paying back its borrowing costs, we assume that the borrowing costs would be low, but construction escalation could be high. And so obviously that's a really kind of important thing for us. And then the other one is that we're really looking for an evaluation of the impacts of a 10-year delay to various programs. So for instance, I'll use pavement condition as an example. If a road needs a certain type of pavement treatment that maybe costs $1 a square foot today, but you can't do it today and you have to wait 10 years, not only did the cost of the asphalt escalate, maybe by 5% a year, maybe by 3% a year, but the road also deteriorated over those 10 years. And if the road deteriorated, that dollar might be $3 or $5 10 years from now. This is a really important factor for the local streets and roads evaluation. Same thing with Caltrain operations. There's a significant investment going on in Caltrain electrification right now, but if the capacity enhancements aren't delivered by the Measure B program, what does that mean for Caltrain? We don't know. Caltrain grade separations, kind of the same thing. I just mentioned Caltrain, but the grade separations are tied into a lot of local activity in the North County, meaning that the cities in the North County have been banking on or counting on these grade separations for development projects in their downtowns. Use Mountain View as an example. They have significant downtown investments associated or that are dependent on the grade separations occurring, and they're tied together. Highway 85 congestion and noise, just basically a 10-year delay. What does that mean for the West Valley cities? Expressway congestion. Obviously, we have less traffic right now, but will it come back? When it comes back? The Expressway program, a lot of the funding is centered on Lawrence Expressway. Of the $750 million, almost $500 million of that is really on Lawrence, and that's really between Sunnyvale. It's the segment of Lawrence between Sunnyvale and Santa Clara that's right outside of the Moffett Park development, essentially between El Camino Real the railroad tracks and Highway 101, and it's to make that segment a freeway-like segment. And then the highway program, same thing. You know, there's been significant dependence on various cities, including, you know, San Jose and actually South County cities, Morgan Hill and Gilroy, have been counting on the highway program, and that's part of their city's plans. So this sets aside a lot of city planning and a lot of cities' plans. And so that's what we're asking for. Now, specifically getting into the county programs potentially affected, this is what we've been doing with our local streets and roads money so far to deliver services to our constituents that use our roads. We've used so far LSR funding for expressway paving, and we've been using our regular gas tax and SB1 money for our local streets and roads paving. And this year, we through this year, we've received $18.5 million in local streets and roads, and we've used it to pave Almaden. We're going to pave Lawrence and Montague. In 2021, we were anticipating an additional $5.7 million, and we are planning on programming that towards Central Expressway paving. Our expressways haven't been paved as well as they should have been in the recent decade. And so this is our plan that we've been implementing using most of the local streets and roads money. Because of this, we're going to have to evaluate the expressway pavement management plan, and we'll start to be able to deliver to our policymakers and our board what's going to happen to our expressways if we suspend paving for 10 years. Kind of the same thing with the county expressway program, $750 million. We have executed our first funding agreement with the VTA. So we reserved $33.5 million in funding, which takes us through what we call projects 1 through 6B. And I can flip to another page to show you what projects 1 through 6B are. Sorry, I didn't have the room on this page to do it. And with that $33.5 million in funding, we will try to deliver within that budget, project 1 through 6B. There is escalation going on right now. And then we also want to validate, do scope validation and estimate refinement for projects 7 through 17. So I will then share, and if you have the time, I'll share with you what we traditionally call the placemat. And I'm going to unshare my screen now. So that concludes the slides.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Let me just interrupt for a minute. Dave, do we have any public speakers on this item?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Harry, anything else you wanted to add in before I turn the microphone over to Supervisor Simidian?
Please do. I have what we call the placemat, which is our list of expressway projects, and I also have essentially the Excel spreadsheet that the county's been, that the VTA has been using to show the numbers on this project. So I have additional screens that I can share should should you request those.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me first ask, I heard earlier the statement that the folks at VTA had some of their own committees operating this morning, but I did wonder if we have anybody from VTA who is participating in the call, and if so, if they could identify themselves, both so that we can address questions to them for response today, or if information is not available today, if they could come back to us at some other time.
Thank you. David, do we have anyone to your knowledge?
I can tell you that we did invite the two VTA staff members that we've been working most closely with on this, and both of them were informed of this but could not attend because they were in other committee meetings, and I don't see them on the list.
Right. Well,
but we can arrange for them to come to this committee.
Thank you. And just for the record, in each of Mr. Freitas's slides and presentations where it said the board, the board, the board, the board, that was not the Board of Supervisors. We were talking about the VTA board. Mr. Simidian, Supervisor Simidian.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I heard you earlier talk about whether or not there might or might not be a need for our meeting that is scheduled, I believe, for December 17th.
Sounds like
but what I'd like to ask is that we perhaps identify that as a special, well, we don't need to call it a special meeting, but identify that as a meeting at which this item will be re-agendized, and that we ask BART officials to be, excuse me, you could see the Freudian slip there, VTA officials to be present and to respond to questions from the committee. Are you amenable to that, Mr. Chairman? I'm sorry to put you on the spot that way.
No, no, I am. You called in on the PAC meeting and expressed yourself. I can tell you, and I'll just interrupt you for 60 seconds here. I can tell you in my 18 years, I have never voted not to receive a report. And there was unanimous objection to what is occurring here. There was promises made, as you said, back when 25% of those funds have been and are expected to go to the cities and county needs, the city needs from your North County to my South County. And this 10-year program is not going to be well received by anyone. And there's a change, I believe, of 5 of the 11 VTA members in January. So there's a lot of change coming forward. Thank you, Supervisor Smitty, please continue.
Thank you. And it's the I think the committee you sit on is called the Policy Advisory Committee, if I remember correctly. Yes. I will say in all my years as an elected official, I have never felt it necessary to sit in on a meeting of the Policy Advisory Committee, let alone comment. But the egregiousness of this proposal, I felt required me to be there and to share my views. I was pleased that the committee took the somewhat unusual step of a 10-0 vote to say we don't even accept the report. And again, that's a fairly unprecedented action. I will say I was disappointed that VTA staff leaned in and attempted to prohibit the elected officials from those 10 communities from expressing their view on a vote. And that further troubled me. I don't often weigh in on staff performance, particularly in other jurisdictions, but the combination of continuing to present what is called a scenario, but suggest that it is not a proposal, and then the effort to have the voice of 10 different communities stifled at the direction of a staff member was really something that I thought was disconcerting. So enough on process. Let's get down to some of the numbers. But a little bit of history, Mr. Freitas. Could you remind me when you joined the county, when we got the benefit of your services?
This would be my third year, so I guess 17 or so.
So let me just share a little history that will be familiar to Mr. Wasserman. We had an interesting circumstance play out in 2014. There was some discussion in the community, and particularly from business leaders and leaders at the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, about a 0.5-cent sales tax on the 2014 ballot. And ultimately, folks concluded that that was too quick to move, and targeted 2016 for the sales tax measure. And that was helpful in many respects, because it meant that the entire county had plenty of notice that a sales tax proposal was in the offing, and we could have a real conversation about what that should or shouldn't look like. I was concerned and curious about the lack of project funding, not just in the South County and the North County, but in the West Valley, and frankly, in much of San Jose, that is not really served by the BART to San Jose project. I think it's, I'm being a little back of the envelope here, but probably 2/3 to 3/4 of San Jose is not really the target ridership for the BART to San Jose project. And so I asked, what were the sources of sales tax funds going back, 20 odd years, back into the 90s? and how had those funds been used? And your department, and I say thank you again, it was your predecessor, Mr. Murder, who was in the seat you're in now, produced that information. And I was a little surprised, perhaps I shouldn't have been, that in my recollection, and I should say very clearly, I'm not altogether sure that my memory is correct, but it was something like 80% of the funds derived from the year 2000 tax and the 2008 tax had gone for BART to San Jose, which meant that literally, the 400,000 people in each of our 5 supervisorial districts were then left with 4 or 5% for congestion relief in their area. And at the time, and I know I can make Mr. Wasserman smile because he'll remember me saying this over and over and over again. I said, look, I can only support a new tax if there is a cap on funding for BART to San Jose that is 25%, and if the proposal is very clear about identifying meaningful congestion relief throughout the entire county. And if Mr. Wasserman heard me use the phrase meaningful congestion relief throughout the entire county once, he must have heard it 100 times.
Supervisor Smitty, I need to interrupt you just to make sure what you just said you want on the record, where you supported a cap on BART to San Jose being 25% of the funds.
Yes, did I misstate myself, sir?
No, if you stated you wanted the BART funding to be 25%, and that meaning the rest of the funding, 75%, went to the cities.
That's right. And we shared that information from the county, and your department, Mr. Freitas, was very helpful in this regard. We shared that information with city councils throughout the county to, in effect, essentially we allowed you all to do the staff work for 15 communities who are very appreciative. And here's where I think we have to give a shout out to local city councils up and down the county, north, south, east, and west. People said, great, now that we know that that's the history, we can have an informed conversation about how these funds should be used going forward. And so that's where the debate began. And frankly, the county, including my office, was able, we thought at the time, to sort of step away from that debate and let local communities make the case. And they did, and did it very effectively. And ultimately, there was an understanding that became the 2016 tax measure with these commitments for, as you've identified, 9 different areas of spending. So what we have in front of us today, and again, I just think some plain speaking is in order. I think that this is the scenario that we've been presented with is an act in bad faith. There is no other way to describe it. And if the intention of folks at VTA was to prompt a discussion, I would say that has happened. And I just want to be very clear. I oppose the proposal, the scenario that has been provided by the folks at VTA. It is wholly unacceptable. And my hope and expectation is that the 15 cities and the county of Santa Clara will all do whatever they can to make sure that the proposal is shelved as soon as we possibly can and have a more constructive conversation about how we make this work. Now, I have some very specific questions, Mr. Chairman, about money. So, Mr. Freitas, let's and I've got my smartphone / calculator in my hand, but I am struggling to understand how, even if you thought you could put every other project on the shelf and say, folks will just have to live with that while we spend the next decade finishing this project, which we've been at work on for 20 years already. At one point you said 5.5 billion. At another point, the number was 6.3 billion in terms of estimated tax revenues. Could you share your understanding of what the difference between those two numbers is?
I added up the allocations in the original measure the measure in 16, and I came up with 5.5, but I've heard 6.3 more recently, and I assume that has to do with the robustness of the economy, but I can't verify that.
Well, here's the question I have about the robustness of the economy. If I enter 6,300,000,000 into my calculator here, and then I divide that by 4 to determine what 25% is. Bear with me.
Somewhere around 1.575, I would think.
That's right. $1,575,000,000. And so if I could ask you to stay with me here on this back of the envelope or a smartphone math. So if the monies came in at the $6.3 billion level, BART San Jose would be entitled to a maximum of $1,575,000,000. That being said, I have looked at the chart you have provided us, which comes from VTA, and which indicates what the 10-year spending would look like. And if I add up the BART Phase 2 numbers, I get $1,955,260,000. That's this chart. Thank you. So do you have any understanding of why, when the total was 6.3, which is already an ambitious number given the 5.5 billion number that was earlier used, folks think that they can draw down $1,955,260,000 without exceeding the 25% cap? And if I've added the numbers across the column incorrectly, please let me know.
No, I don't know. And the BART project has undergone really massive types of escalation based on selection of tunnel boring technology, and it's really bounced around. I have not been following the BART project that closely, but I will obviously make sure that we get that question answered.
Well, thank you, because all due respect, whatever's happened with the project, this is the reason that many of us were so concerned that there be a 25% cap, so that we didn't hear later on that, oh, we've had cost overruns, and that has to once again come out of all the other worthy projects that could have and should have been funded. So, Mr. Wasserman, I hate to do this to you in real time, but I ask you to add up the numbers in 2024 through 2030 and just double check my math? I literally did it, by hand here on the sheet, but I added up, and it's $1,955,260,000. And if I've done my math right, and maybe I haven't, but if I've done my math right, that means that all of a sudden $400 million more than the 25% cap is being allocated. And that's if the tax revenues are as robust as predicted. And that leads me to my next question for you and the folks at the Technical Advisory Committee, Mr. Freitas, which is, the one thing I noted was that as we looked through the report you provided, and thank you, I thought it was a very crisp summary. I'm looking at packet page 31, where you tell us that UCLA's June 2020 forecast projected a substantial decline in sales tax revenue compared to their 2017 projections. So that further complicates the matter, because we had a number somewhere in the 1.5 to 1.6 billion dollar level. The numbers on the chart VTA has provided are closer to 2 billion. So we're off by a factor of about 400 million, unless Mr. Wasserman checks my math again.
Yeah, I checked your math. It's correct.
And then in addition, we're looking at a number that is well in excess of the cap, even as VTA has acknowledged that their own UCLA study, which I hope we can get a copy of, predicts a lower tax revenue rather than a higher one. 25% of less is less. It is not $400 million more. Now, again, I don't want to shoot the messenger here. But I do want to ask you, is there something I'm missing in my analysis? Because you're the guy on the technical advisory committee.
You know, I don't think so, but no, not on the face of it. There's a lot of, I do not, and I have not studied the BART project well enough to understand it. And it's just,
yeah. And speaking of the BART study, did I understand you correctly earlier to say that if the BART project requires financing, that it is the position of the VTA that the financing costs of BART should be attributed to the 8 other categories rather than to BART itself?
That has been, that's directly from VTA staff at the ad hoc committee meeting. It was directly, that was a direct question that I asked, and that was a direct answer.
Well, I think you asked a great question, and I think you got a very bad answer. And it's one that I think on its face should be rejected. So I'll just, again, I want to put that out there on the record. If there are financing costs associated with BART, those financing costs need to be attributed to BART and not to any other project. Never mind as a matter of law, that's just a matter of common sense. And Mr. Chairman, I know you know this, but Mr. Freitas and I don't think I've ever had this conversation. Mr. Freitas, you should know I've been a supporter of BART San Jose for 20 years. I supported the measure back in the year 2000. Did not take a position on the one in 2008, but I've been a supporter of the BART San Jose for 20 years. That's not the issue here. The issue is the decisions that were made and the commitments that were made in 2016 that need to be honored. And just again, if the scenario that is on that draft proposal were to come to fruition, that means there's no money for local roads. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
And I should just point out, and again, you're the expert, so please correct me if I'm wrong. I remember just 2 years ago, there was yet another statewide study that said the cost of unrepaired roads and highways in California for individual drivers in terms of increased wear and tear, maintenance costs, fuel costs, and depreciation on their own vehicles was in excess of $60 billion for our state. And that worked out in our area to around $983 for individual drivers each year. Am I remembering that roughly correctly?
Yeah, I don't know that particular report, but California roads from a national perspective are in really some of the bottom tier of roads. California has not invested in its roads because of, you're very familiar with the way the taxes have come in and the way they're spent, but our roads are in terrible condition, and they do lead to not only excessive cost for local agencies, but they cause vehicles to use more gasoline, and they damage vehicles, and they cause crashes when they're in poor condition.
All right, so no money for local streets and roads, no money for Caltrain grade separations, is that correct?
That's correct.
No money for Caltrain corridor capacity improvements, is that correct?
For 10 years.
No money for highway interchanges, is that correct?
That's correct.
No money for county expressways?
For 10 years.
No money for Highway 85 corridor improvements?
That's correct.
How is it that transit operations got added in as well?
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
And I'm not sure you listed, but bicycle and pedestrian is also part of the no money.
Yeah, I do know a little bit about Bike Ped. I mean, Bike Ped, excuse me, they had gone through a competitive process and allocated money for Bike Ped. And so that is the reason that they gave us why Bike Ped is still listed. I will point out that when the proposal was originally made to the staff, local streets and roads had a 50% reduction. So the proposal has changed since it originally was rolled out.
Supervisor Simidian, if I may interrupt for just a moment.
Please, you've been very generous with letting me poke and probe. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. I have some others, but please go right ahead.
Thank you. On package page 27 and 28, it's a letter from their deputy GM, their CFO. At the bottom of the page, the paragraph says the present value of the program tax revenue as of April 2017 is forecast to be approximately 6.3 billion. And that's the number they're using. I think that's how they grew from 5.5 to 6.3. Then on page 2 of 7, couple of inches down, the program category are the approximately 10 categories that you just listed. The second one being BART Phase 2 with an asterisk. And that asterisk says capped at 25% of the program revenue. So everything you have said is spot on. The numbers don't add up. I remember when this was put before us and my endorsement was requested, each of the cities, the 5 cities in my district, they wanted to make sure monies were there for local streets and roads, bicycle and pedestrian, grade separation, highway interchanges, county expressways, 85, etc. And that was the promise that they were given. And that the BART Phase 2 portion would be limited to 25%. And I think you're spot on. And yes, I think the December 19th meeting will be almost exclusively about this, but not receiving the report from UCLA, that was commissioned with public dollars to determine the revenues. And this whole thing about having apparently already exceeded the 25% of expenditures that were supposed to be limited to BART Phase 2. I think we need to shed more light on that, and I'm in agreement about agendizing it for the 19th. And through to you, Harry, whoever else is appropriate, Sylvia perhaps, if you'll please reach out to the VTA members that Supervisor Simidian wants to have there. Perhaps it's just people who can respond to these questions. Perhaps it's the CEO, the COO, whomever. I think giving them a month's notice, I hope they can attend a Zoom meeting. Thank you, Supervisor. I just wanted to get that all in.
No, thank you. And just forgive, I think the meeting is currently scheduled for December 17th. Just a double check on that.
December 17th. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to, if you're amenable, ask our county council to provide a memo on what the process would be, and this one not on such short notice, but I do think the CPRA one is pretty straightforward. But I would appreciate a memo, Mr. Chairman, and if you'd like to join me in the request, I would appreciate that as well, that identifies what the process is for local jurisdictions to withdraw from the VTA should they wish to do so.
Thank you. Mr. Lubresti, did you get that?
Yes, we'd be happy to provide that.
There's a process that created VTA, and there is a process, presumably, to unpack it, or at least allow individual jurisdictions the opportunity to work on a regional or sub-regional basis if they find that the countywide VTA is no longer addressing the congestion issues of our county. Just one more question for Mr. Freitas. Mr. Freitas, VTA is an interesting governmental creature in my view because it has the responsibility for transit operations, yes?
It does.
But it is also, pursuant to state law, as I understand it, the CMA for our county, the Congestion Management Agency. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And as a congestion management agency, it has a responsibility to do just that, manage congestion throughout the jurisdiction, which is all of Santa Clara County. Is that correct?
Yes, it has historically had a long history of that.
And the proposal we've got absolutely positively fails to do that. And the reason I asked the question, Mr. Chairman, about transit operations also being front-ended this way is that it would appear that the agency, which I know is in a hard place financially, has essentially said, we're going to fund our transit operations and BART to San Jose, but we're not going to accept the responsibility to allocate funding for any of the other projects that are essential to its role as a congestion management agency. Now, Mr. Freitas, that was a lot of policy take on my part, but is there anything I've said there that was inaccurate factually?
No.
Okay, this is a hard conversation to have for obvious reasons, but I just think it's important to underscore the fact that by law, VTA is our congestion management agency, and if it's not addressing the other half dozen issues that are essentially left out of the picture for a decade, then it is failing to do its mandated duty under state law. Mr. Chairman, I think that's it for me today. Thank you again. You've been very patient. Mr. Freitas, thank you. You've been very helpful. And again, I thought the report communicated a lot of information in a very helpful way. What is the timeline on this, Mr. Freitas? Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, since we're talking about scheduling meetings.
Yeah, thanks for actually asking that. I didn't reflect that in my slides. So the way the VTA approached us on this was they indicated that they were planning for their biannual budget, or I think it's better to call it a 2-year budget because I get confused on biannual, but they're preparing for a 2-year budget that they hope to that they have to pass in June of 2021. So when they originally approached us on this, they indicated that, well, we're getting a head start on our budgeting process. Be prepared for some, changes to funding, because we're shortfalling revenue. Excuse me. The interesting thing that we pointed out also was that they did a 10-year outlook on Measure B, but they didn't do a 10-year outlook for other elements of their budget. And I thought that was kind of a missing piece because we don't really know, and perhaps we haven't evaluated this yet, but there's still leftover funding from Measure A and other capital programs that the VTA has administered, as well as just the 10-year outlook for transit, because if you do a 10-year outlook for one program, but you're not kind of doing a 10-year outlook for the other programs, it's kind of hard to have a balanced conversation when you're evaluating budget priorities. So.
Yep.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I note as I flipped to packet page 37, which I believe is the VTA presentation with a timeline and action points. The timeline and action points slide, packet page 37, indicates that the 2016 Measure B fiscal year 22, fiscal year 23 budget will be adopted by the VTA board in April, May of 2021. So even ahead of, and I see Mr. Freitas shaking his head in what I take to be frustration, but he can tell us what he's shaking his head about. So that happens in April, May, which means that we could be pretty darn close to somebody thinking it's time to take a vote on this, which is why I felt there was a sense of urgency. Through the chair, Mr. Freitas, was there something about that caught your attention?
Yeah, I shouldn't have said. I'm used to saying budgets are passed in June because our fiscal years all kind of come together around June. I wasn't aware that the VTA is doing it basically a month earlier.
No, I think the information you shared was entirely accurate. I'm looking at the same timeline, and it indicates that in June, that's when the biennial budget is scheduled for action. But I did think, is there anything that or could share with us that suggests that the chart we have indicating possible decision making on Measure B funds as early as April is incorrect, or should we be okay, then I think our timeline, Mr. Chairman, it should be predicated on the notion that we need to get this sorted out as quickly as possible because that action could be scheduled as early as April, according to the chart from VTA.
Agreed.
Okay.
Mr. Freitas, anything else to add?
If I may, through the chair. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
If I may, through the chair, I wanted to correct the record on a statement that I made earlier. In preparing for the meeting, I attempted to back check whether or not the original Measure B had been escalated. And I did as the Supervisor Simitian mentioned, a back of the envelope, added up the various categories. And I think I made a mistake adding, and I mistakenly said 5.5 billion. The original program equals $6.3 billion, and I misstated that, and that was just a clerical error on my part. But I was trying to compare what was essentially on the ballot versus whether or not there was escalation because of what I said was the robust economy. And then obviously with the pandemic, the decline in the economy. So, but these roller coasters are expected over these 30-year programs. But that was a mistake on my part.
No, thank you. Thank you. And again, through the chair, my concern is, and Mr. Wasserman, you or Mr. Freitas may know from your roles on these advisory committees, but if while the chart says, I think the need for urgency is, as we just discussed, the budget decision may be in June, but the timeline indicates that these Measure B funds could be allocated literally, for the next couple of years as early as April. But I've been hearing that there's talk at VTA about bringing this to the VTA board as early as February or March. Have either of you got any insight or data about that?
I have not heard.
Well, if we could also ask staff to, when we come back in December, make sure that we can get a clear answer from VTA about the timeline on that, because Mr. Freitas, I thought, made an important point, which is that, there will be significant turnover on this BART board. Excuse me, my Freudian slip, on this VTA board in the beginning of the new year. And so I think to rush this thing to a board with a substantial number of new members who are probably wholly unfamiliar with this budget process is a further violation of process that I think we have to be concerned about. So I'll add that to the list. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Freitas, anything else?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to move approval of the receipt of the report with the direction as indicated?
Yes, with the direction. Mr. Lopresti, anything else to say?
No, Chairman Wasserman.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion by Supervisor Simitian with the direction for the request for the VTA to appear for the UCLA report, whatever is possible to come there. There was another one, Supervisor Simitian, that you asked.
Had to do with the process for withdrawing from VTA if one or more local jurisdictions chose to do it. And then the request of our county staff, in addition to Mr. Lopresti, was both to make sure we have VTA staff present to address these issues at our meeting on the 17th of December, and also that at that time we have some clarity from VTA about what the timeline is for this action, because it's been a bit of a moving target in my experience.
And I second that.
Thank you, sir.
You betcha. Dave, did you get that, or can you retrieve that later?
We got that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a motion by Supervisor Simitian and a second by Wasserman, so that passes unanimously. We handled 7 through 12, Supervisor Simitian, in consent. That brings us to 13, unless you have anything else to add.
No, the only other thing it occurs to me, and I know sometimes it seems like District 5 brings you a lot of work, Mr. Chairman, but I do think we're looking at some of the quarry issues on the 17th of December as well. So we should just plan accordingly if that's the case. I'll double check.
Thank you. So without objection, we are going to adjourn this meeting of Hewlett to December 17th at 10 a.m. I wish you all a happy and safe Thanksgiving next week. And we'll see you again in December. Thank you all very much for your time. Thank you,
Thank
Supervisor.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.